everyone, it's Sarah, and today I am back to talk about modern smelling. I was gonna do just modern smelling 90s fragrances, but we're getting to the point where things that came out in the early to mid 2000s are now becoming vintage. They're coming up on that 20-year mark, and I'm pretty sure once something is 20 years or older, it is considered vintage. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna pull some things from kind of early to mid 2000s as well. So these are fragrances from the 90s and the early to mid 2000s that I think still smell incredibly modern. I've also got a couple of newer fragrances that I think smell vintage, like 90s, 2000s, that I included. So I've got a bunch here. I'm gonna jump right in. So the first one we're gonna talk about is Lolita Lempicka. This is the EDP formulation, and this came out in 1997. So this is a perfume that I have had in my collection, I would say since the early 2000s. I wanna say I got my first bottle maybe 2003, 2004. I picked it up at Marshall's. And I've been in love with it ever since, and I've had it in my collection in some form ever since, and I adore it. This is a fragrance that I think has absolutely stood the test of time and still smells very modern. It's such a beautiful use of licorice in a fragrance without smelling too literal. It doesn't literally smell like licorice, but you definitely do smell the licorice. I just adore this. It's got like an ivy note in it or some kind of a green note in it. It's got iris and orris, and it's got tonka bean in the base, and I can always smell the tonka bean in the base of this one. And it's just a beautiful, timeless perfume that I think still smells incredibly modern. This is a perfume that I still wear, and I never feel like I'm wearing something that smells dated at all. It smells very, very modern. So yeah, that is the first one. That is Lolita Lempicka. Next we have got Hypnotic Poison, and you would never believe that this fragrance came out in 1998. It is still incredibly popular. This was one of those fragrances that I think was way before its time. It smells amazing. There is nothing vintage or 90s smelling about this perfume. It's still so popular. People talk about this. I mean, clearly I'm still talking about it, and it is 2023. This came out in 1998. I think most perfume collectors have this or some version of it in their collection. There are still fragrances that are being released onto the market duping this fragrance. I mean, Zara is still making fragrances that dupe this fragrance. It's just an incredibly modern smelling, timeless fragrance. It's a 90s perfume that I think still smells incredibly modern, and I love this. It's a perfume that I will always have in my collection, and it's just an amazing scent that at this point has just become a cult classic. So that is Hypnotic Poison. Next we've got Pure Poison. This didn't come out until 2004, but we're coming up on 20 years now that it's been since this was released. And this, I feel, this is another one that I feel like is still so modern smelling, so timeless, classic. It's another one that people still absolutely love. You still smell perfumes being released onto the market today that resemble this fragrance. Yeah, I don't think anybody can really top this one. It's definitely in a league of its own, but there are still fragrances coming out today that are similar to Pure Poison. And I just think it's incredible. I would say Dior is definitely, behind Guerlain, is definitely my most favorite designer house. I just think that they make amazing perfumes. They do make timeless fragrances. And you can see that, because I could have pulled so many other fragrances. I could have pulled the original Miss Dior Cherie. I could have pulled Dior Addict. I could have pulled most Dior fragrances, because they all are timeless and classic and still smell amazingly modern. And this one for sure is no exception. It's incredible. So anyways, that is Dior Pure Poison. Next we've got a Burberry perfume. This perfume came out in 1995. This is just the original Burberry for women. And I love this. This one smells, I wouldn't say that this smells completely modern, and this is the original formulation. I don't think it smells dated though. This is kind of a soft, powdery, slightly fruity because of the peach, just warm hug of a fragrance. And I definitely do not think that this smells like it came out in 1995. This is a fragrance that, again, I am completely comfortable still wearing to this day. I don't feel like I smell dated at all. I feel like I smell very classy and classic. I just love this. It's a timeless fragrance, and I can't believe it came out in 1995. I thought for sure this came out in like the early 2000s. No, it definitely came out in the mid 90s, which is crazy. Just such a good fragrance that has really stood the test of time, and I love it. I think it smells, I don't think it smells completely modern, but again, I don't think it smells dated at all. So that is Burberry for Women. So next we have Stella. Stella came out in 2003, so this is 20 years old this year. I can't believe it. This is now considered a vintage perfume. I bought this the year that it launched. I bought this as soon as it released. I was so excited about this fragrance, and I loved it so much for so many years, and I've had it in my collection for the past 20 years. I've always had a bottle of Stella. It's still to this day my favorite rose fragrance on the market. Not only does it not smell dated, to me this does smell like a modern rose. And I remember back in 2003 when I first started wearing this perfume, when it first released, I remember thinking that it was the most incredible rose fragrance I had ever smelled. It smelled like nothing I had ever smelled before. It smelled so modern. Gone were our grandmother's roses, and here we had the most beautiful modern rose. And I remember, like, after smelling this perfume, I didn't even really know who Stella McCartney was. I knew she was Paul McCartney's daughter, but I didn't even know she was a designer, because I just wasn't into that, I just wasn't into that when I was in my early 20s. But this perfume, I thought that Stella McCartney was a genius, and I also thought that Stella McCartney is the one that actually formulated her perfume, which I seriously doubt that she was, but in my head she was a genius, because this was the most fantastic perfume I had ever smelled in my life, and I still feel like that. This perfume to me is still so incredible. It's so modern smelling, even 20 years later. It's still such a modern, beautiful, well done rose. It's so classic, classy. I will always have a bottle of this in my collection. I cannot imagine being without Stella. To me, this is one of the best perfumes like ever in my lifetime, for sure. I know that that's a bold statement to make because there are so many perfumes on the market, but nothing will ever compare to Stella for me. It's just one of the best. So anyways, that is Stella McCartney's Stella. Another perfume that I think is incredibly modern smelling is Elizabeth Arden Green Tea. This came out in 1999, which still blows my mind. For whatever reason, I thought this came out when I was in middle school. I had definitely already graduated from high school by then, so I don't know what I was smoking, but I guess I wore sunflowers in middle school. I definitely know I wore sunflowers in middle school. For some reason, I was thinking I wore green tea too. No, I didn't. This came out after I had graduated high school, which makes sense because I couldn't really place it in my mind what grade I was in when I wore green tea because I wasn't in a grade. I had graduated from high school already. But yeah, I think that green tea is such an amazingly modern smelling scent. This has definitely stood the test of time. It's not the same as it was. This used to be an absolute beast. It used to be nuclear. It was super strong, fragrant, just made with better materials all around. But this is still an amazing scent. It's fresh, it's light, it's classy. It can be worn any time of the year. It smells so clean, and I think it smells expensive. This smells like an expensive lady to me, like somebody who wears all white, white trousers and a white sweater, and she has a beach house somewhere and she's just got a lot of money, and she always smells like green tea. She just smells clean and classy, sophisticated, and understated. I think this is an amazing perfume. it's definitely stood the test of time. It does not smell like it came out in 1999. This smells like it could have been released 5 years ago. This is a perfume that I would recognize that it was green tea, but this is a perfume that people are still making fragrances to smell like green tea. It's just such an amazing fragrance. I know there are some people out there that don't like this one, but I just think it's such a timeless and amazing modern smelling tea scent. So that is Elizabeth Arden Green Tea. Another fragrance that launched in 1999 is Dior J'Adore. I told you I could have pulled almost my entire Dior collection because Dior just makes amazingly timeless smelling perfumes. J'Adore is a perfume that I have people, anytime I talk about this fragrance, I inevitably will have somebody comment on the video that I talked about J'Adore in, saying that they have worn this since it came out in 1999. It is still their signature scent to this day, and I can see why. This is an amazingly well-rounded floral. It's a kind of honeyed smelling floral. It's very rich smelling. It's, again, very classic smelling, expensive smelling. This one has just stood the test of time. This is people's signature scent to this day. I'm glad that they've never changed the bottle because the bottle is amazing. It reminds me of a beautiful woman in Africa that, you know, that does the neck jewelry and they stretch their necks. That's what this bottle reminds me of. I think everything about it is just stunning, and I love it. The perfume is classic and timeless and super modern smelling. This is a fragrance that does not smell dated to me, not even a little bit. It smells incredibly modern to me. Again, if you repackage this, if they repackaged this and rebottled it and released it as a different fragrance, I think we would all know, because we all know J'Adore after so many years. But I don't think anybody would even bat an eye at it being a brand new perfume. It's amazing. Such an incredible scent. Most Dior's are just like, as far as designer goes, as far as a designer house goes, I just think Dior, for the most part, is on another level. Now, I hate it when they reformulate and butcher a fragrance, but they're like most of their original creations, and I could have pulled Midnight Poison too, but I didn't. I think that came out in 2005. Maybe, I think 2005. But yeah, Dior is just on another level as far as their perfumes. I just think that they're absolutely stunning. So that is Dior J'Adore. Okay, this next one, this is a modern fragrance. I have no idea when this one came out. I would guess within the last, I can look it up, I don't want to, but I would guess this one came out within the last, I don't know, 5 or 6, 8 years or something. This is a Pascal Morabito fragrance, and this is Sultan Or. And this is a modern fragrance that smells vintage but has absolutely stood the test of time. This smells almost identical to Lancome Poème, and it is phenomenal. So this is an example of a modern fragrance that is looking backwards in time and taking inspiration from an amazing 90s scent, which is Lancome Poème. And it's incredible. It just shows you that these fragrances do stand the test of time. They do smell modern. They can be reinvented over and over again, and we will still fall in love with them over and over again, just like I have this one. It's an amazing scent. I mean, one of the best purchases I made last year, for sure. One of the best. So that is Pascal Morabito Sultan Or. Next we have Rochas Tocade. This fragrance was released all the way back in 1994. This is another fragrance that I think smells amazing. It smells incredibly modern. It's a beautiful kind of dry floral vanilla fragrance. It's a little bit sweet. It's super classy smelling, cozy smelling. It does not smell like something that was released in 1994. I could have also pulled Chopard Cashmere. It's another beautiful, very classy vanilla scent. That one does smell a little bit more vintage though. This smells a little bit vintage to me, but I think if a niche house rebottled this and released it tomorrow, I think that people would absolutely love it and they wouldn't even think twice about it. I don't think that they would smell it and be like, oh, this smells like something that came from 1994. No, they would be like, oh, this is an incredible niche vanilla scent. I love this scent. It has definitely stood the test of time. It doesn't smell like something from 1994. I definitely think it smells like a modern niche fragrance. I love it. Such a cozy, beautiful little gem of a fragrance, and I love the bottle. Now the bottle gives it away. The bottle definitely does look like something from 1994 or even earlier. It could have come straight out of the 80s. But I think if this was repackaged and was released by a niche house, I don't think anybody would ever even suspect that it was from 94. So anyways, that is Rochas Tocade. Okay, this next one, this has always smelled so incredibly modern to me. This is a fragrance from Issey Miyake, and this is L'eau d'Issey. This is the EDT formulation. This fragrance came out in 1992. It might be one of the oldest fragrances on this list. This in no way smells like something that came out in 1992. This smells incredibly modern to me. It's so fresh and clean and slightly sweet. And you want to talk about something that has stood the test of time. This is definitely a fragrance that I wear and never feel like I'm wearing a vintage smelling fragrance. In fact, Avon has a whole line of perfumes that smell just like this. There's so many fragrances on the market now that smell like Issey Miyake that are very new fragrances. Like I said, the whole like Avon Haiku line, they all kind of resemble L'eau d'Issey. Guernes Layla, very similar to Issey Miyake. It's just such an incredible fragrance that has absolutely stood the test of time. I remember back in the 90s thinking that this is the most modern smelling fragrance I had ever smelled. This is another fragrance that was so far ahead of its time. Back in 1992, a lot of people, my mom was still wearing Poison and Obsession and Estee Lauder Cinnabar. I mean, my mom was still wearing stuff like that. And this came on the market, and this is just something like, I mean, it may have well been from Mars at that time. It was so far ahead of its time. And here we are 30 years later, which is insane to think. 30 years, more than 30 years, 31 years have gone by since this fragrance was released. And I still have it in my collection. I've got a flanker of it too, and I still wear them. They're amazing, incredibly timeless fragrances. This is a modern fragrance, for sure. I just think it's amazing. So anyways, that is Issey Miyake L'eau d'Issey. Next, I don't have the original. This is the EDT formulation, but this is what I have to show in place of the original. This is Mugler Angel. Angel was released in 1992 as well. So this and Issey Miyake are the oldest fragrances on this list. And this is another fragrance that is absolutely timeless. There are so many smell-alikes of this perfume on the market. People are still making smell-alikes of this perfume. It's incredible. This fragrance, I remember when this fragrance came out, and I remember it was another one that it just felt so modern. It smelled so good. Everybody wore Angel when it first came out. It was a little too mature for me at that time, and not mature in the sense that we talk about, you know, in the way that we use the term mature now, but just like in 1992, I was 12. I probably would have rocked Angel, but I would have run the risk of smelling a little bit out of my league. But I remember smelling Angel on teenagers and thinking that they were just the coolest girls ever. Thinking that they smelled like they had a lot of money and like they were the coolest girls in the world. Angel, those of us that remember this perfume when it came out, there's definitely like an association with this perfume. And I still smell this perfume on people to this day. In fact, when I first started working at Starbucks back in 2000, there was another store manager that this was still her signature scent, and probably still is to this day. She had been wearing it since high school, and she was still wearing it in 2006. And for a fragrance that came out in 1992, and the fact that we're all still buying flankers of it, and most of us still have the original formulation of it in our collection in some capacity. I just have a mini of it because I wouldn't really wear it. I love the EDT, but the EDP, it's oversmelled. Like, I've been smelling it for so many years at this point. It's just not something that I would want to wear on a regular basis. But the EDT still retains the Angel DNA. It still smells like it. So it's just an amazing fragrance. And the fact that 30 years later, they're still making flankers of this perfume, I mean, that just shows you it is an incredibly modern smelling fragrance, and it's just an amazing perfume all around. And I could say the same for Dior. I feel like it can be applied to Mugler. I feel like Mugler fragrances are just going to be timeless and classic, and we are all going to be wearing them, until we're well into our 90s, if we make it that far. They're just classics. They're timeless. They're modern smelling, and they're amazing, especially Alien too. I mean, all of them. I could go on. But anyways, that is Mugler Angel. Okay, this next one, my beautiful friend Jacqueline sent this over to me. I think this was her backup bottle of it. And I remember I think she sent me a decant of it first. And as soon as I smelled it, I was like, oh my gosh, that takes me straight back to the 90s. This is a fragrance from Vicky Tiel, and this is called Sirene. This one was launched in 1994. This is such an amazing smelling scent. This is another one that this could easily be repackaged into a new designer bottle. And it's one of those scent profiles that I think would be like a rediscovery for people. There's something about it. It definitely smells like it came from the 90s, but it's one that when I wear it, I don't feel like I'm wearing a vintage perfume. And I guess that's really the bottom line here, is if you are able to spray on a perfume that came out 20 or 30 years ago, and you don't feel like you're walking around wearing maybe your grandmother's perfumes, or if you don't feel like you smell vintage, then it's a modern smelling perfume. And that's how I feel about this one. It definitely has this beautiful 90s kind of scent profile. But when I wear this perfume, or I wear it out of the house, I would be willing to bet that not a single person that smells it on me would be like, oh, that's an old smelling perfume. People are just gonna think that it smells good, that it smells modern. I adore this perfume. And there are still perfumes being released onto the market today that smell like Sirene, that have this kind of a scent profile. In fact, when I was looking up the date for this one, I was looking at the smells like section, and there are some people that think that this smells like Frederic Malle lipstick rose. Now, I definitely see the similarity. I wouldn't go so far as to say it smells like lipstick rose, but it's similar. It is definitely similar. So that's what I'm saying. It's just a beautiful, modern smelling, timeless perfume that came out in 1994. It's amazing. So anyways, that is Vicky Tiel Sirene. Okay, and then last but not least, we've got Lalique Lalique. This is another one that came out in 1992. So this is right up there with Issey Miyake and Angel as being kind of the oldest on the list. So this is another beautiful, classic, kind of modern smelling floral. I would never guess that this came out in 1992. This is another perfume that there are still perfumes being made and released that smell like this, or that have a similar profile. Another perfume that smells really similar to this is Kenzo Flower Eau de Lumiere. It's very, very similar to this, and I don't know when that one came out, but definitely not in the 90s. So this, again, it's a gorgeous, modern smelling, sweet, but cozy and warm floral. This scent brings me so much like peace in my heart. It's got such a comforting smell to it. It's the most beautiful, warm floral. And again, smells incredibly modern. This does not smell like something that came out in 1992 to me at all. It just smells divine. And if this were released today, I think if any designer released this as a perfume today, again, I think people would absolutely love it. This one and the Vicky Tiel one definitely, I think, smell the most vintage-ish on the list, but these are over 30 years old at this point. But I still think they smell completely modern. Again, every time I go out of the house wearing this, I get compliments on this perfume, and nobody would ever suspect that I was wearing a perfume that was 30 years old. Over 30 years old, 31 years old. It's just incredible how long these have stood the test of time and just how amazing they still smell to this day. I just love them. Our perfumes, those of us that were like kids and teenagers in the 90s, our vintage perfumes that we grew up wearing are definitely not our grandmother's perfumes or our mom's vintage perfumes. We definitely got really, really lucky with perfumery, I feel like. Not that I don't love vintage perfumes from, you know, the 50s, 60s and on up, but I just feel like, I don't know, our vintage perfumes are really, really cool. So anyways, that is Lalique Lalique. And I could have gone on, you guys, because you know how many vintage perfumes that I have in my collection. I could have pulled even more, but I had to stop it somewhere. I enjoyed this video so much because, you know, vintage perfumes are my passion. I love talking about them. I love pulling them out and sniffing them. They bring me so much comfort. I do hope that you all enjoyed this one, and I hope this was a fun one for you as well. If you did enjoy it, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe before you leave, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.